In all sports with a physical strength component, some form of overtraining can occur, and we usually call that junk volume. This happens in climbing too, but it's a little bit more nuanced than a sport like weightlifting, which solely relies on your physical muscular strength. Climbing isn't solely a strength sport and has a much higher skill component than a lot of other sports. This means that for climbers, it's harder to find the optimal amount of training because training involves physical work as well as skill work. Not only do we have to find the optimal amount of load to put on our body, for example, our fingers, we also have to find the optimal amount of time spent training the technique of climbing. We then have to take these two variables and find the values of both at which our overall climbing progression is maximized. We can think of this as an equation with two parameters, one being the amount of time spent training our climbing technique, and the other being amount of load on our muscles and other physical attributes. When it comes to knowing when to end your sessions, because you're starting to move into that junk volume side of things, the strength component is a lot more obvious. Knowing what your body can physically handle and how long it'll take to recover from your sessions comes with time and experience, but as a general rule, we can say you should end your sessions after you start to become seriously fatigued. Again, this relies on a lot of different factors like how often you climb, how fast you can recover, what sort of movements you were doing throughout the session. Cutting off that last inefficient half an hour or hour at the end of our sessions where we're no longer at peak strength is quite important in my opinion. You'll see a lot of climbers, myself included sometimes, just carry on their sessions for way too long for a lot of reasons. I mean, obviously climbing is the most fun thing in the world, so we just want to keep climbing. But it can also happen if you're just giving way too many goes on your project, so on and so forth. It's really important to end your session at a good point where your performance hasn't dwindled too much. The number one and most obvious reason this is important is because of injury prevention, which I learned firsthand 2 months ago. I just spent way too long on this crimpy move, which I was trying to learn over and over again for about 2 hours. I was just full crimping on my left hand, just non-stop, after I'd already projected for about 2 hours. And yeah, my pulley just couldn't take the load. Your joints can only handle so much load without recovery time. And it took my first major finger injury for me to really internalize that lesson. So don't be like me. Respect your limits. In addition to the physical consequences of junk volume, we also have technical consequences where overtraining has an impact on overall climbing, skill learning, and technique. Cutting that last bit of inefficient training at the end of your session over a week or a month results in you being able to spend more time doing higher quality movement because your body's in a better state and therefore it's better skill practice. This is because cutting out the junk volume lets your body recover faster and therefore you can climb for more time overall in the long term. This is really important for skill learning because your best learning happens when your body is at its peak form, and that can only happen when you're well recovered and not in a state at the end of your session. Lastly, I think working yourself to exhaustion every session just leaves it on a bad note, and I feel like it doesn't have good impact on your overall climbing motivation. Me personally, if I was just leaving every session beaten down, it would definitely have a negative effect on my motivation across the long term. If you could instead leave your session on a good note, feeling positively about it, I think it would definitely positively affect your motivation. I really think the role of motivation should never be underestimated in what it takes to make a really great climber. For example, Adam Ondra, a lot of people call him the GOAT, and he must be one of the most motivated climbers alive. I think the two have a strong correlation. I'd say some practical tips for knowing when to end your session. If you're working a project and you start to regress, if your grip starts feeling a lot weaker and you start feeling pumped, even if your mental game starts dropping off, you start becoming frustrated. Frustration can often lead to low quality attempts. Side note, this is another reason I think knowing the moves on your project is so important before you start giving send burns. I've seen so many people start trying to send without knowing all the moves and they just waste their time. If you start feeling some joint pain that you've never felt before, if any of these things happen, wrap it up. It can be hard to, especially if you're really emotionally invested in a project or something like that, but you will for sure make better climbing gains over the long term.